Hello again, and welcome to In Taiwan We Speak, your audio guide to Taiwan's mind-blowing linguistic diversity. I am Alexander Shin, and today we continue our conversation with Ljius Kulivu, a professional English Mandarin translator and a Paiwan activist. Now, UNESCO Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger classifies Paiwan as an endangered and vulnerable language. Ljius, the status of a vulnerable language, well, it might not be as bad as, let's say, extinct, as it's happened to many languages in Taiwan. But at the same time, do you yourself worry about the future of Paiwan language?
I worry very much if it goes obsolete and then Paiwan worldview cease to exist.
That with the language, the worldview
Of
will
Paiwan.
disappear.
The rituals disappear, and even Paiwan language, we have different Paiwan language. The Paiwan language we listen to is an everyday language, but in ritual we have a ritualized Paiwan language. If no one is speaking that, using that, or passing down the language, and then no language.
Do you think that might actually happen?
It might actually happen. I think so. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite sad, but I think there are some efforts doing that.
Right.
Yeah. Some people from different backgrounds, like, for example, church, they have Paiwan Bible, and also some government's efforts into, putting money into like saving the language, and also some young people are taking up the role to be a shaman.
In the community.
Yeah, in the community, and they have to learn Paiwan language.
Speaking of vulnerability, what are some of the main problems that prevent Paiwan from going from vulnerable to being a safe language?
One is some Paiwan consciousness, like people who move to the cities, like in their 60s, 70s. They're like young people, right? At that time, they move to cities, and they have their kids raised in the cities, and everything is like predominantly Mandarin. But in their school, there's no indigenous language lessons. Even if they have, they are not taught as seriously as mathematics and English or Chinese. Yeah. So I think that's one of the main problems we have, is our education system that really don't pay attention to having more Paiwan or indigenous languages classes
In the cities?
in the city, around
Everywhere.
on island, and everywhere. Yeah, I think that's one of the main problems. Yeah.
So even in the traditional communities like Tibet-Katan, you don't really have quality education for Paiwan language?
We have quality of Paiwan teachers, but not enough hours. When I was a kid, I was having only 2 hours of Paiwan languages a week, where I have Chinese like 8 hours and mathematics 8 hours.
And 2 hours of Paiwan language a week. Where does it get a kid in speaking Paiwan?
Not really.
It doesn't really get you anywhere.
Doesn't get it anyway. So at the time when I was a kid, that was in the time people are developing the writing system of Paiwan language, and then people are using like a popularised to document Paiwan language.
The Mandarin system.
The Mandarin system, and they do have a Paiwan Bible out of the popularised, but people are also developing using like Roman alphabet. So right now we're using Roman alphabet, but even we're using Roman alphabet, the writing is not standardized. Originally, we don't have a writing system. Yeah, so we're trying to figure out how to better preserve and document Paiwan languages, and this one of the issue too.
There's still no written standard for writing Paiwan language.
No.
So basically every community just uses their own standard.
Yeah, you use your own standards with Roman alphabet. Yes.
I would assume that without a written standard, it would be very difficult to actually promote education.
It is.
Yeah.
So I think there are some like internal politics into who set the standard. Right now, I think the predominant one will be Gulalao. Dialect will make more sense because Gulalao has preserved all the K, Q that are silencing other communities.
Oh.
Yeah, everything they pronounced, so far as I know. Yeah, the Gulalao dialect, and also the population, like descendants of Gulalaos are quite a big population. Yeah.
Is that your dialect?
No, it's not my dialect, but my dialect is closer to that dialect.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we're the central Paiwan.
And what is being done in your community, in Paiwan areas, but also in Taiwan in general, to preserve Paiwan language?
What's being done is that the Council of Indigenous People, they have set up Indigenous Language Foundation, okay? And that foundation is responsible of having Indigenous language proficiency test. With that, if you pass some certain level, and you can get some like incentives. If you want to be a civil servant as an indigenous person, you have to have proficiency tests passed to have the job. And yeah, it's kind of incentive and like kind of like affirmative actions from the government, and it's also something that the government has like spent some money on having like one language promoter in a township, yeah, and working with church and to document the languages. Yes.
What does a language promoter do?
What I know is like all the official documents that a promoter have to translate
Into this local language?
into Paiwan. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
There are also indigenous languages teachers at schools. Yeah. And there's a funding that is called like indigenous language babysitter. Basically, government will pay your grandma to take care of the kids, and it's speaking only Paiwan language. There's also a policy that you can apply for, and they got some funding.
Anyone can get it. I mean, if you're from a Paiwan background.
And not just Paiwan, indigenous background.
Right.
And I know there's also an effort, a training program to train these Paiwan speakers or indigenous language speakers, to train them to be an interpreter. Teach them some like, techniques to be an interpreter. Yeah.
And do you feel like the action that's being taken, the laws that being adopted, is this enough to save Paiwan?
I don't think this is enough. I think we also have to be more proactive in doing that, because we're so used to speaking, like predominant language, because that's the first language of many people right now. But people need to have this consciousness of the language of Paiwan needing to be, passed down or documented. Yes, we have to also work hard on that too. Yeah, on our end.
You mentioned once that you wrote your master's thesis and did your research on urban indigenous people.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about that?
So my master's thesis is trying to answer the question, what does being indigenous person mean for an urban indigenous youth? And it talked about why those young people would like to return to their homeland from cities, and the intention and their identity really changes depending on where they are. They are urban indigenous youth, meaning that they are educated outside of Jusgatan. So people of their age, it's Mandarin where they speak, right, in the city. But in Jusgatan, people around my age, they can somehow speak some Paiwan language, and and then they go to same school together. So the kind of different social groups. But those urban indigenous youth, their families from Jusgatan, they want to go back to get to know more about their community, and to get to learn. And some urban youth are chief family, so they need to go back to continue their duty and to be chief. So they have to do something. Yeah. So basically, everyone has different identity, right? But the identity changes when they are in Jusgatan. They think they're Jusgatan. They are not other communities, because in New Jusgatan we have also other different Paiwan people from different old settlements that came to live with us. And when they're in the city, they think they are Paiwan. They don't think they're really indigenous, just Paiwan. Yeah. And when they're abroad, They think they're Taiwanese, indigenous.
Mm.
Yeah, so the identity changes, and for them, indigenous status is always with them, no matter where they go, but they respond to it differently.
So even in the cities, the Paiwan youth would still identify as indigenous.
Yeah, they will think they're Paiwan. Yeah, yeah.
And speaking about going back to the community, is that happening a lot among the young Paiwan?
Not really. It depends on your homeland. If your homeland is quite not too far from the city where you can work, then you go back, or some people just leave in the homeland and commute between their work. But for some Paiwan community, for example, in the East Coast, it's quite far to go to their office and work, so people decided to move to the city and then buy a house in the cities, or just move for Taipei. Yeah, but in Pingtung, the situation is relatively better. We still have population outflow, but the pace is not as severe as in the eastern Taiwan.
I know that you actively participate in various international conferences and activities representing both Paiwan and Taiwan in general. And you mentioned that earlier this year you traveled to Guam for the International Indigenous Youth Forum that was organized by Taiwan's Council of Indigenous Peoples.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about this work of yours and about the international efforts to preserve Austronesian languages?
So first of all, I went along with other indigenous students and also young people from the Austronesian area. And language-wise, it's very interesting when I came to Guam, Chamorro is the language and also the people. A lot of things that is so similar with Paiwan. For example, in Paiwan language, when we say people, we say zao zao, and they say tao tao.
In Chamorro.
In Chamorro. And then we say chest or breast, we say dudu, and they say susu. And then when we say son, we say gadao or adao, and they say adao. And home, house, we say guma, and they say guma. Yeah, lima means 5, and they also say lima as 5.
That's interesting.
So it's very interesting. So this is what I learned, and then also the efforts they are doing is that we visited one school. The school is about to teach kids from like 3-year-old or 4 until like 12. Everything taught is in Chamorro, and no English was spoken, especially for the younger generation, like this young kids, like preschool kids. When we visited there, the teacher said, don't speak anything, don't speak in English. I don't want them to hear English, so they can get used to Chamorro sound. And every subject in Chamorro, and that is, for me, is mind-blowing, because this should be something I should have, or my parents should have had. I think Taiwan can go and take reference from Guam.
Are there any current efforts to bring this practice to Taiwan?
So far, I don't see concrete efforts, because if that's going to be in Taiwan, the Ministry of Education will get involved in this, and the Taiwanese government is quite slow on that. In Taiwan, public school or private school system is very standardized, everything. Yeah, so I think you will need some time to do it, but I think it is needed. Yeah, very much.
Well, let's hope that it happens sometime soon.
Yeah.
And on that rather hopeful note, we've arrived at the end of our conversation with Ljius Kulivu, a professional English Mandarin translator and a Paiwan activist. Now, Ljius, thank you so much for this super interesting conversation and for your time with us.
Thank you.
And dear listeners, thank you for being with us. If you've enjoyed this and past episodes about the Paiwan language, then please share them with your friends and give us some boost on social media. And of course, don't forget to come back for our next guest, with whom we'll be unpacking another one of Taiwan's fascinating languages. Which one? Join us to find out. Once again, this was In Taiwan We Speak, your audio guide to Taiwan's mind-blowing linguistic diversity. This was Oleg, and see you next week.